The summer sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the small town of Eldridge. It was a town that seemed frozen in time, with its antique storefronts and cobblestone streets. However, as dusk settled in, shadows danced along the alleys, whispering secrets that were better left unheard. Jake Collins had always dreamed of being a cop. After years of grueling study at the police academy and countless hours spent chasing his dreams, he finally received the call. He had been hired as a police officer in Eldridge. The excitement coursing through him was palpable, though it was laced with a twinge of apprehension. What lay ahead was unknown, and rumors about Eldridge's peculiar past only fueled his nerves. On his first day, the chief of police, a grizzled man named Chief Rains, called him into his cramped office. The air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and old paper. Chief Rains sat behind a battered desk, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Welcome to Eldridge, Officer Collins. We're glad to have you on board," he said, his voice gravelly. "But before you start your shift tonight, there are some unusual rules you need to know." Jake nodded, eager to hear what the chief had to say. He assumed it would be the standard protocols. Don't exceed speed limits, maintain your equipment, and stay vigilant. But what came next was far from ordinary. "Listen closely," Chief Rains said, leaning forward. "These rules might seem strange, but they're designed to keep you alive. You're not just patrolling the streets, you're stepping into something deeper than law enforcement." Jake swallowed hard, curiosity piqued. First, Rains began, counting on his fingers. "Never patrol alone after midnight. You'll want a partner by your side. The town can change after dark." "Okay, I can do that," Jake replied, a bit bewildered. "Second, if you hear laughter in the woods, ignore it. The last officer who investigated didn't come back." A chill crept down Jake's spine. "What do you mean?" Rains waved a hand dismissively. "Just trust me, it's better to let it be. Third, if you find an open door in a vacant building, don't go inside. It's never a good idea." Jake jotted down the rules, his heart racing. "What's next?" "Fourth, don't engage with anyone who doesn't make sense. If they're talking in riddles or acting strange, walk away." "Got it." "Fifth, if you receive a call on the radio that seems off like a disturbance at the old cemetery, it's probably a trap. Don't respond." "Okay," Jake frowned, trying to comprehend the implications. "Sixth, if you find something that doesn't belong, like a child's toy or a shoe, leave it alone. It's not yours to touch." "Seventh, keep your flashlight on at all times. You'll need it more than you know." "And the last rule?" Jake asked, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. Rains leaned back, his expression grave. "Never, under any circumstances, stay in your car if you hear knocking. Get out and run." Jake stared at the chief, his mind racing. "These rules, why do I need to follow them?" "Because, Officer Collins, Eldridge has a history. Things happen here that don't make sense. Just remember these rules, and you might make it through the night." As night fell, Jake donned his uniform, fastening the badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The weight of the rules hung heavily in his mind as he met his partner, Officer Lisa Grant, a seasoned cop with a reputation for getting the job done. "Ready for your first night?" she asked, a smirk on her face. "Just trying to wrap my head around these rules," Jake replied. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "What rules?" Jake recounted Chief Rains' strange guidelines, expecting laughter or disbelief, but instead her expression turned serious. "Listen, Jake, this place is different. You'll get used to it, but you have to be careful. I've seen things that will haunt you." "Like what?" She hesitated, glancing toward the darkened streets. "You'll find out soon enough. Just trust your instincts and remember the rules." As they patrolled the empty streets, the quietness of the town was unsettling. Shadows stretched across the pavement, and the wind carried whispers that seemed to call Jake's name. The streets were lined with towering trees, their branches swaying ominously in the breeze. Jake tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on the task at hand. He and Lisa cruised down Main Street, passing shuttered shops and darkened houses. Everything seemed normal, yet Jake felt the weight of the rules pressing down on him. "Let's check the park," Lisa suggested, breaking the silence. The park was expansive, with twisting paths and dense woods encircling it. As they approached, Jake noticed an eerie silence. It felt as if the world held its breath. Lisa parked the cruiser and they stepped out into the cool night air. "Remember, if you hear anything strange, don't investigate," she reminded him. Suddenly, a burst of laughter echoed through the trees, chilling Jake to his core. He froze, glancing at Lisa, who looked equally concerned. "Stay close," she whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows. As they walked deeper into the park, the laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling quiet. The moonlight cast long shadows, creating shapes that danced along the ground. Jake felt a growing sense of dread. Just as they reached the edge of the woods, the radio crackled to life. "Unit 14, we have a report of a disturbance at the old cemetery. Possible trespassers." Jake's heart raced. He glanced at Lisa, who shook her head. "We can't go, it's a trap." "But what if someone is in trouble?" he countered, the instinct to help overwhelming his senses. "Jake, we have to follow the rules," Lisa insisted. "We can't." "Unit 14, please respond," the dispatcher's voice echoed through the static. Jake felt the weight of the decision settle in his gut. Ignoring the rules felt wrong, but the thought of leaving someone in danger gnawed at him. "Let's just check it out," he said, determination flooding his veins. Lisa cursed under her breath, but didn't argue further. They got back into the cruiser and Jake drove toward the cemetery, anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. As they approached the wrought iron gates, Jake felt an icy breeze sweep through the car. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the grave markers like spectral sentinels. He parked near the entrance, and they stepped out, flashlights in hand. "Stay close," Lisa warned, her voice barely above a whisper. They moved cautiously, the beam of their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The cemetery was silent, save for the rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, stopping in his tracks. "What?" Lisa turned, her expression tense. "There's someone." Before he could finish, a loud bang echoed from the direction of the old mausoleum. They both jumped, hearts racing. "Let's go check it out," Jake urged, adrenaline coursing through him. "No," Lisa shouted. "We need to leave, now." But before she could grab his arm, Jake was already moving, drawn by a force he couldn't explain. He approached the mausoleum, its stone facade looming ominously in the moonlight. As he stepped closer, the door creaked open, revealing darkness within. Shadows flickered like phantoms, and Jake felt an inexplicable pull, as if something inside was beckoning him. "Jake, don't," Lisa shouted, panic lacing her voice. But it was too late. He was already crossing the threshold. Inside, the air was cold and musty, and the faint scent of decay lingered. Jake's flashlight illuminated the crumbling stone walls, revealing faded inscriptions and cobwebs. A sense of foreboding washed over him, but curiosity propelled him forward. "Jake, get out of there," Lisa yelled, her voice echoing in the confined space. Ignoring her pleas, Jake ventured deeper into the mausoleum, his heart pounding. The silence enveloped him, thick and suffocating. He stepped over a broken urn, and the sound of shattering ceramic filled the air. It was a small, child's toy, a porcelain doll, its face cracked but still eerily painted with a smile. The moment he touched the doll, the temperature in the room plummeted. A whisper brushed against his ear, chilling him to the bone. "Help me." Jake recoiled, dropping the doll as if it had burned him. He turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind him with a resounding thud. "Lisa," he shouted, panic rising in his chest. He banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Jake," Lisa's voice broke through the door. "What's happening?" "I'm trapped," he cried, fear gripping him. Suddenly, the shadows in the room shifted, coalescing into a figure, a girl no older than 8, her ghostly form flickering like an old film. Her eyes were hollow, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. Jake stumbled back, his heart racing as he realized he was not alone. The girl reached out, her tiny hand grasping at the air. "Help me, please." "No, get away from me," Jake shouted, his voice trembling. In that moment, the weight of the rules pressed down on him like a shroud. He remembered Chief Rains' words, "Never engage with those who don't make sense." But here he was, face to face with a lost soul, and all he could feel was dread. "Help me," the girl whispered again, her voice echoing through the mausoleum. Jake's mind raced, searching for a way out. He pounded on the door again, panic rising in his chest. "Lisa, get me out of here." The girl's expression shifted, a hint of anger clouding her features. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither are you," he yelled, backing away. The air thickened, and the temperature dropped further. Shadows twisted around him, and he could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. "Leave," the girl hissed, her voice turning sharp. "Before it's too late." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath Jake's feet, and he stumbled, nearly falling. The shadows surged forward, grasping at his legs. He felt a cold grip around his ankle, pulling him toward the darkness. With a surge of adrenaline, Jake turned back toward the door, ramming his shoulder against it. "Let me out," he screamed. Just as he thought all was lost, the door creaked open, revealing Lisa's frantic face. "Get out, now." Jake dove through the opening, heart pounding in his chest. He didn't look back as he sprinted into the night, Lisa close behind. They reached the cruiser, and he fumbled with the door, throwing himself inside. "What the hell was that?" Lisa gasped, breathless. "I don't know. A girl, she was in there," Jake stammered, still shaken by the encounter. Lisa shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. "We shouldn't have come here. We broke the rules." "Yeah, no kidding," Jake replied, hands trembling as he gripped the steering wheel. "What do we do now?" "Let's get back to the station," she said, her voice steadying. "We'll report this." As they drove away from the cemetery, Jake glanced in the rearview mirror. The mausoleum loomed in the distance, an ominous silhouette against the moonlit sky. "What just happened?" he whispered, feeling a sense of dread settle in his gut. Lisa remained silent, her expression grave. It was clear to Jake that the night was far from over, and the 8 strange rules were only the beginning of his nightmare. The cruiser's light sliced through the darkness as Jake and Lisa sped back toward the police station. The weight of their encounter in the mausoleum hung heavy in the air, suffocating and oppressive. Inside the station, the atmosphere was tense. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and the sound of ringing phones filled the silence. Chief Rains stood behind the front desk, his face a mask of concern. "What happened out there?" he demanded, his voice low and urgent. Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "We got a call about a disturbance at the cemetery. We went to check it out, and I got trapped in the mausoleum." Rains' eyes narrowed. "You're not supposed to go there. Did you see anything?" Jake hesitated, glancing at Lisa, who looked equally shaken. "I saw a girl, a ghost, I think. She was asking for help." "God damn it," Rains muttered, rubbing his temples. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Did you engage with her?" "I tried to help, but she..." Jake's voice trailed off as the memory flooded back, the fear and dread crashing over him. "She warned me to leave. I think I angered something." Rain sighed, his expression hardening. "You need to follow the rules, Collins. They're not just suggestions, they're for your survival." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of guilt settle on his shoulders. "I know. I just thought..." "Thought what?" Rains interrupted sharply. "That you could save her. You can't save anyone in this town, not without consequences." As the chief spoke, the radio crackled to life, interrupting the tension. "Unit 14, respond. We have a report of strange noises near the old mill." Lisa's eyes widened. "We can't go back out there, not after what just happened." Rains looked between them, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "You're still on duty. This is your job." Jake's heart sank. "But we just encountered something supernatural. We're not equipped to handle this." Rains leaned closer, his voice low and intense. "Eldridge has its secrets, Collins. You need to learn to navigate them. You're not just patrolling a town, you're facing something much darker." With a heavy heart, Jake and Lisa got back in the cruiser, dread settling in the pit of Jake's stomach. The drive to the old mill felt interminable, the air thick with an unshakable tension. The mill was located on the outskirts of town, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. As they arrived, the wind howled through the trees, creating an eerie melody that sent shivers down Jake's spine. "Stay sharp," Lisa warned as they stepped out of the cruiser. They approached the entrance of the mill, its wooden beams creaking ominously. The windows were shattered, and the air carried the scent of mildew and decay. As they entered, their flashlights flickered against the walls, illuminating remnants of machinery covered in rust and dust. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, his heart racing. "What?" Lisa replied, straining to listen. A low groan echoed from deeper within the mill, reverberating through the silence. "Let's check it out," Jake suggested, despite the fear gnawing at him. Lisa hesitated but nodded, gripping her flashlight tightly. They moved deeper into the mill, each step echoing in the vast emptiness. The groaning sound grew louder, more distinct, and Jake felt a sense of foreboding settle over him. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from above, sending debris raining down around them. Jake ducked instinctively, heart racing as he glanced up at the ceiling. "What the hell was that?" Lisa exclaimed, her voice trembling. "Let's get out of here," Jake urged, turning to head back toward the exit. But as they moved, they were stopped in their tracks by a figure emerging from the shadows. A man, gaunt and wild-eyed, his clothes tattered and stained. "Help me," he screamed, his voice filled with desperation. "They're coming for me." Jake's instincts kicked in. "Who's coming? What's going on?" The man stumbled closer, fear etched across his face. "The shadows, they're alive. They want to take me." Before Jake could respond, the lights flickered, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat. When the lights returned, the man had vanished, leaving only a chilling silence in his wake. "What just happened?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Jake replied, fear pooling in his gut, "but we need to leave." As they turned to exit the mill, the groaning sound returned, louder and more insistent. Jake felt an oppressive weight in the air, as if unseen forces were closing in on them. "Run," he shouted, adrenaline surging as they sprinted toward the exit. The shadows seemed to reach out, grasping at their legs as they burst into the night air. They stumbled into the open, gasping for breath as they reached the cruiser. "What the hell was that?" Lisa asked, shaking as she climbed into the passenger seat. "I don't know, but we can't stay here," Jake replied, fumbling with the keys. He started the engine, and they sped away from the mill, the darkness swallowing it behind them. As they drove through the empty streets of Eldridge, Jake's mind raced with thoughts of the girl in the mausoleum and the frantic man in the mill. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the shadows. "Do you think we should report this?" Lisa asked, glancing nervously out the window. Jake frowned. "What would we even say? That we saw a ghost and a crazy man? They'll think we're losing it." But as they continued down the dimly lit streets, the radio crackled to life again. "Unit 14, respond. We have a report of strange lights coming from the abandoned church." Jake exchanged a worried glance with Lisa. "Another call, we can't go." But Raines's voice came over the radio, low and firm. "Unit 14, respond. This is an order." With a heavy heart, Jake turned the cruiser toward the church, anxiety pooling in his stomach. The abandoned church stood on the edge of town, its steeple reaching toward the night sky like a skeletal finger. The air felt charged as they approached, and Jake could see flickering lights through the cracked stained glass windows. "What do you think is going on?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have no idea," Jake replied, trying to steady his racing heart. "But we need to check it out." They parked the cruiser and stepped out, the cold air biting at their skin. As they walked toward the entrance, the flickering lights danced across the ground, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. "Stick together," Jake said, gripping his flashlight tightly. As they entered the church, the atmosphere shifted, thick with an unsettling energy. The air was stale, and the flickering lights illuminated rows of pews covered in dust and cobwebs. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the pulpit, soft and melodic. "Welcome, welcome. It's been so long since we've had visitors." Jake's breath caught in his throat. "Who's there?" he called, scanning the room. From the shadows emerged a figure, a woman dressed in white, her hair cascading around her shoulders like a veil. She moved gracefully, her eyes shining with an otherworldly light. "Come closer, dear children," she beckoned, her voice soothing yet haunting. "Stay back," Lisa shouted, stepping protectively in front of Jake. But the woman only smiled, her gaze piercing through the darkness. "You've come to join us, haven't you? We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for us," Jake echoed, his heart racing. "For what?" "To become part of the light," she whispered, reaching out a hand. "Join us, and you'll never be alone again." Jake felt an inexplicable pull toward her, a desire to step forward, but the memory of the girl in the mausoleum flashed in his mind, breaking the spell. "No," he shouted, shaking his head. "We have to leave." With that, he turned and ran for the exit, Lisa close behind. As they burst through the doors, the flickering lights extinguished, plunging the church into darkness once more. Outside, they stumbled back to the cruiser, breathless and terrified. "What the hell was that?" Lisa gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Jake replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly, "but we're not going back in there." As they sped away from the church, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line, that the darkness of Eldridge was closing in on them, ready to swallow them whole. The cruiser rattled as they navigated the winding roads of Eldridge, the weight of the night pressing heavily upon them. Jake could feel the darkness encroaching, creeping into the edges of his mind. Every shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and the flickering streetlights cast ghostly figures that danced just out of reach. "Where do we go now?" Lisa asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. "I don't know," Jake replied, struggling to maintain focus. "Maybe back to the station. We can regroup and figure this out." As they approached the station, the radio crackled to life once more, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Unit 14, respond. We have reports of a missing person, last seen near the woods." Jake's heart raced. "Not again," he muttered, dread pooling in his stomach. "Jake, we can't go. Not after everything we've seen," Lisa urged, her eyes wide with fear. "I know, but we can't ignore it," Jake said, his resolve hardening. "We need to do our job." Reluctantly, Lisa nodded, and they set off toward the woods. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their branches twisted and gnarled, casting ominous shadows on the ground. The air was thick with tension, as if the very forest held its breath, waiting for something to happen. As they parked the cruiser at the edge of the woods, Jake felt a familiar chill creep up his spine. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. "Stay close," he warned, gripping his flashlight tightly as they stepped into the darkness. The woods were eerily quiet, save for the rustling of leaves underfoot. As they ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew heavier, a palpable sense of dread settling around them. Suddenly, a rustle in the underbrush made Jake stop in his tracks. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, straining to listen. "Yeah, it came from over there," Lisa replied, pointing toward a cluster of trees. They moved cautiously toward the sound, hearts racing as they swept their flashlights across the undergrowth. The beam caught something, a flash of white, a figure darting between the trees. "Hello," Jake called, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Is anyone there?" Silence responded. As they continued deeper into the woods, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to shift, and the air grew colder, each breath visible in the chilling atmosphere. "Maybe we should turn back," Lisa suggested, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "No," Jake replied, his determination growing. "We need to find this missing person." Just as he spoke, a figure emerged from the shadows, a girl no older than 12, her eyes wide with fear. "Help me," she cried, her voice trembling. Jake's heart raced as he approached. "What happened? Where are your parents?" "They're gone. They went into the woods and never came back." Jake's instincts screamed at him, "Stay here, we'll find them." But as he turned to signal Lisa, the girl's expression shifted, a sinister smile curling on her lips. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered, her voice now echoing in the silence. Jake froze, fear coursing through him. "What do you mean?" Suddenly, the shadows coalesced around them, twisting and writhing like dark smoke. The girl's form flickered, revealing glimpses of something far more sinister beneath her facade. "Leave, now," the shadows whispered, their voices merging into a cacophony of terror. Jake's heart raced as he grabbed Lisa's arm. "We have to go, now." They turned and sprinted back through the woods, adrenaline fueling their flight. The shadows chased them, a swirling mass of darkness that seemed to stretch and shift, reaching for them with grasping tendrils. "Jake, hurry," Lisa shouted, her breath coming in gasps. Branches clawed at them as they ran, and the laughter of children echoed through the trees, a haunting melody that chilled Jake to the bone. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were not just being pursued, but hunted. As they burst through the tree line and into the clearing, Jake glanced back, fear flooding his senses. The shadows had receded, but the sense of dread remained, heavy in the air. "Get in the cruiser," he yelled, and they scrambled into the vehicle, slamming the doors shut. Jake started the engine, his hands shaking as he glanced back toward the woods. "What just happened?" "I don't know," Lisa replied, her voice shaky, "but I think those kids are part of something dark, something that doesn't want us here." Jake nodded, his mind racing. "We need to report this. We need to warn the others." As they sped back to the station, Jake's thoughts swirled with images of the shadows and the girl's haunting smile. What was happening in Eldridge? Why were the rules so strange? And what were they meant to protect against? When they arrived at the station, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Chief Raines stood at the desk, his expression grave as he took in their disheveled appearance. "What happened out there?" he demanded, crossing his arms. Jake exchanged a glance with Lisa, then stepped forward. "We encountered a girl in the woods. She was lost, but then she changed. The shadows, they were alive, and they wanted us to leave." Raines's face paled. "You encountered the lost children." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, confusion flooding his senses. "They're not just kids, they're spirits trapped between worlds. They lure people in and feed off their fear. You have to be careful, they're not to be trusted." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "But we didn't know. We thought we were helping." "Helping will get you killed," Raines replied sharply. "You have to follow the rules. They're not just for your protection, they're the only thing keeping the darkness at bay." Lisa looked at Jake, fear evident in her eyes. "What do we do now?" "Stick to the rules," Raines said, his voice stern. "And whatever you do, don't let your guard down." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The rules were more than just guidelines. They were a lifeline in a town consumed by darkness. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of unease. The atmosphere in the station was tense, the weight of the night pressing down on Jake and Lisa. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, and the shadows seemed to linger at the edges of their vision. As the night deepened, the radio crackled to life once more, breaking the oppressive silence. "Unit 14, respond. We have reports of strange occurrences at the old quarry." Jake exchanged a worried glance with Lisa. "We can't go back out there," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to," Jake replied, determination hardening his resolve. "We need to find out what's happening." Reluctantly, Lisa nodded, and they set off once more into the night. The drive to the quarry felt like a descent into darkness, the headlights cutting through the shadows that seemed to envelop the world outside. When they arrived, the air was thick with tension, and the ground was littered with debris. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene. "What do you think we'll find?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but we have to be careful," Jake replied, gripping his flashlight tightly as they stepped out of the cruiser. As they approached the edge of the quarry, a chilling wind swept through the area, sending a shiver down Jake's spine. The shadows danced at the edge of their vision, and he could hear faint whispers carried on the breeze. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the quarry, a woman, her hair flowing like a veil, her eyes dark and hollow. "Help me," she called, her voice soft and melodic. Jake felt a familiar pull toward her, a desire to step closer. "What do you need?" he asked, instinctively moving forward. "Come closer and you'll see," she whispered, beckoning him with a graceful hand. "Don't go, Jake," Lisa shouted, pulling him back. But it was too late. Jake found himself stepping toward the woman, drawn by an unseen force. "Join us, it's so easy," she coaxed, her voice wrapping around him like a warm embrace. "Jake, stop," Lisa screamed, her voice breaking through the fog that clouded his mind. With a sudden burst of clarity, Jake shook his head, breaking free from the enchantment. "No, I won't let you take me." The woman's expression darkened, her form flickering as the shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf him. "Leave, now," they hissed in unison, their voices a chorus of darkness. "Run," Jake shouted, grabbing Lisa's arm as they turned and sprinted back toward the cruiser, the shadows clawing at their heels. As they reached the cruiser, Jake fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he tried to start the engine. The shadows closed in around them, a swirling mass of darkness that threatened to pull them under. Come on, Jake shouted, panic rising in his chest. Finally, the engine roared to life, and he slammed the vehicle into gear, racing away from the quarry. The shadows receded behind them, but the sense of dread lingered, heavy in the air. What just happened? Lisa gasped, her voice trembling. They were trying to lure us, Jake replied, shaking with adrenaline. We need to warn the chief. As they sped back to the station, Jake's mind raced with thoughts of the woman and the shadows. What were they, and why were they so desperate to trap him? When they arrived, the station was quiet, the lights flickering ominously overhead. "Chief," Jake called, stepping inside. But the room was empty and a chill ran down his spine. "Where is he?" Lisa asked, glancing around nervously. "I don't know," Jake replied, unease settling in his gut. "But we need to find him." As they searched the station, a sudden noise broke the silence, a low, mournful wail that echoed through the halls. "Jake, what was that?" Lisa asked, her voice quaking. "I don't know, but we need to find out," he said, steeling himself as they moved toward the source of the sound. They followed the sound down a dimly lit corridor, the air growing colder with each step. As they approached the back room, Jake felt a sense of foreboding settle over him. "Chief," he called, pushing the door open. The room was dark, shadows clinging to the corners. In the center stood Chief Rains, his back turned to them, speaking softly to someone in the darkness. "Chief, what's going on?" Jake asked, stepping inside. Rains turned slowly, his eyes dark and hollow. "You shouldn't have come here." Jake felt a jolt of fear shoot through him as he took a step back. "What do you mean?" The chief's expression was unreadable, and the shadows around him seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "You've seen too much, the darkness is closing in, and you're not safe." "What are you talking about?" Lisa demanded, her voice shaking. "The rules," Rain said, his voice low and haunting. "They're not just guidelines, they're a warning. The darkness feeds on fear and ignorance. You've disturbed things that should have remained undisturbed." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What do we do now?" "You must confront it," Rains replied, his gaze piercing. "You're the only ones who can stop it." "Stop what?" Jake pressed, desperation creeping into his voice. "The shadows," Rains whispered, glancing toward the door. "They're gathering strength, and they want to break free. You need to understand the truth about Eldridge." Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the shadows surged forward, closing in around them. "No," Jake shouted, lunging for the door. But the shadows were faster, wrapping around him like a cold shroud. He felt their icy grip tighten, pulling him into the darkness. "Jake," Lisa screamed, her voice filled with terror. In that moment, the world around him shattered into darkness, and Jake felt himself being pulled into the void. Jake's consciousness flickered, and he found himself in a strange place, a realm of shadows and whispers where the darkness seemed alive and pulsing with energy. "Welcome," a voice echoed around him, smooth and melodic. "You've come to play." Jake felt a rush of anger. "What do you want from us?" "Fear," the voice replied, a sinister smile lurking beneath the words. "Your fear fuels our power. You're here to feed the darkness." "No, I won't let you," Jake shouted, his heart racing. "You think you can resist?" the voice taunted. "You're already trapped." As the shadows closed in, Jake felt the weight of despair threatening to consume him. But in that moment of darkness, a glimmer of hope sparked within him. "I won't give in," he declared, pushing against the shadows with all his strength. With each surge of defiance, the darkness recoiled, as if his resolve was a light shining through the void. "You don't own me," Jake shouted, forcing his way through the shadows. Jake's determination fueled a light within him, a warmth that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. As he fought against the shadows, he felt Lisa's presence alongside him, their bond an unbreakable thread in the fabric of reality. "Jake," Lisa's voice echoed through the shadows, breaking through the despair. "We can do this together." With renewed strength, they faced the darkness side by side, their combined willpower illuminating the void. The shadows writhed, hissing and recoiling from the light they generated. Together, Jake shouted, grasping Lisa's hand. "We can't let them take us." The shadows roared, a cacophony of rage and desperation as they surged forward. But with each step they took together, the light grew stronger, pushing back the darkness that had threatened to consume them. With one final surge of energy, Jake and Lisa broke through the darkness, emerging into the light. They found themselves back in the police station, the shadows receding like a tide. Chief Rains stood before them, his expression a mixture of relief and awe. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We had to face it," Jake replied, panting from the effort. "But it's not over, is it?" "No," Rains said, his gaze solemn. "The darkness will always be there, lurking just beyond the veil. You must remain vigilant." Lisa nodded, her resolve hardening. "We will." As they stepped outside into the early morning light, the sun began to rise over Eldridge, casting away the shadows of the night. "We've faced the darkness and survived," Jake said, looking out at the horizon, "and we'll keep fighting." With the light breaking over the town, they knew that while the shadows would always exist, they had the strength to face whatever came next. Together, they would protect Eldridge, one night at a time.